For over 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails. Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition. That's what the American people deserve. I know for some people, it's a time for victory, to state the obvious. For others, it's a time of loss. Campaigns are contests of competing visions. The country chooses one or the other. We accept the choice the country made. I also hope we can lay to rest the question about the integrity of the American electoral system. It is honest, it is fair, and it is transparent. And it can be trusted, win or lose.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. My name is Andy Lipson, and I'm here with Gema Alberto Sotomayor.
Yes.
I'll tell you exciting detail about today that's important today in a moment. We are online at whatsleftpodcast.com. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, share your favorite episodes, and jot out our information wherever you found this episode. Don't worry about expecting to find too much information in our links. We can no longer post anything on our links anymore because we're like bad for the community. So if we want to put links on there, we have to give YouTube my ID or do some sort of video. And I'm like, forget you guys.
You don't have one of those McDonald's Club's ID you can send them?
No.
Mickey Mouse Club?
No. And I wouldn't even give that to them. So forget you, YouTube. So if you want links, go to a different channel, or it's kind of, you'll see whatsleftpodcast.com. Just remember that. Anyway, first, the most important detail of today, right? Let me actually get this out of the way.
I don't know that we want to. I don't know that it's the most important detail, but sure.
It is the most important detail. Today is Gema's birthday.
Huh? Thank you. I know you guys are plotting, sending me well wishes, cakes, balloons. Love it.
Well, what's amazing is Eduardo couldn't be here. We were supposed to actually record yesterday, but Eduardo got a stomach virus, so I was actually prepared to maybe do this alone.
You do this alone?
Well, because I couldn't bring Brandy in, and no one else was going to be able to come in. I mean, you were the last hope. And so you agreed yesterday to record with me on your birthday, and she's got a bunch of people visiting her. We're down here in her basement. I didn't actually think about your birthday when I said we wanted to record together. I just figured I wanted to record together.
No, and folks, this is how important this is to Lipson. Forget his adoptive daughter's birthday. Forget what's happening in the world. No, even if there's a party going on upstairs, we're recording now.
Right.
Let's go.
That's right.
I have some shit to say.
Right. So we're going to be talking about this week what I'll probably be talking about next week and the week after that.
For the next foreseeable 4 years.
For the next month at least, is this Trump's election. We talked about it last week. I can't remember the title. It was, Make America Gullible Again. How we were basically saying people are falling for the same old hopium that people fell for under Obama. At least that was the way me and Eduardo talked about it. And today I want to talk about this question that kept on coming up in this last week, which was, why did Trump get elected? And so there's a lot of different views on that. And I have some views on it. And I know Eduardo had some ideas, but he's not here.
Right.
So let's start. And I'd like to start with you about why you thought Obama got elected.
Obama or Trump?
Interchangeable. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
Why did Trump get elected? I've got Obama on my brain because I'm having PTSD from my comrades leaving me. Well, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So I haven't fleshed it out. I know we talked about it a little bit last weekend. I do have some ideas. In general, I want to say that the United States is just very discontent, and they want to see change, and they are hoping that Trump still is that change.
That's and the U.S. people you're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Right.
So the U.S. citizens or the voting citizens, right? there's a lot of U.S. citizens that can't vote. But
Yeah.
for those that can vote, I do think that there is that discontent with just the whole system, not just the Democrats, but I do think the system in general. And they're thinking that Trump's going to come, demolish it, do his own thing. It's going to be better for them. Some of the conversations that I've had with folks that are pro-Trump in the state of California are more towards the economy. They look at where the economy was during his term versus where it is now, inflation, and they just feel like Trump is going to set things straight. I don't know if you guys saw with the market, the day after he was announced as the winning, the markets went up. Everything was positive, and it's been staying pretty positive. So there's a couple of things, and I know that we kind of talked about that. And then on the other side, just coming from a woman's perspective, I knew there was no way in hell that Kamala was going to be elected. Not just because she's a woman of she's a person of color, but because she's a woman. And I do think that the world may not be ready for a female president in the United States, considering the influence that they have internationally, especially what's going on in the Middle East and Hamas and Israel, and those cultures tend to not be favorable towards women. So I do think that they kind of set her up for failure. They were kind of hoping that he would win, and they knew that people were not going to feel confident in her way to run the United States, but even less so dealing with foreign politics. So kind of that's my take. I just think that he was going to win regardless. I don't think there's.
Yeah, and what I think, I'm glad I'm doing this with you, Hema, because I'm gonna you're gonna challenge me on things you don't agree with.
Yeah.
And Eduardo would, but right now Eduardo's busy with other things,
I'll
so
do it.
he's not pushing me on episodes as much.
I'll make you proud, Eduardo. I'll make you proud.
So I want to start with what you said about Kamala, because I do remember I felt like Trump was going to win before the election, but I was like, wait, are they really thinking that they're going to do her like this empty vessel person, you know? Because she was a horrible candidate. Yeah. They tossed her in front of all these things that made her look awful. Yeah. But at the same time, they were constantly giving us polls, feeding us polls of like how well she was doing, and that was a close. I had no reason to believe it was close. Like I had no reason to believe those polls, but I was like, okay, I don't believe their elections, so I guess they'll just steal it if the ruling class wants her, they're just gonna take it and give it to her. Correct. Right? That's how I looked at it. So the only doubt I had was like, is the ruling class really going to go with this person? Like, it didn't make sense, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure until the events happened, and now I look back and I go, oh my God, yeah, the thing you said about they were pushing Kamala to drive everyone to drive people to Trump. Sure. Yeah. It's really clear to me like that was very much the case. Like, and in the same way that I believe they engineered a assassination attempt, the third attempt was a complete fraud. The second attempt was like barely an assassination, but they gave every impression that this was a person who the establishment was frightened of, wanted down. CIA had to take him out. So they know there's massive discontent, and they drove that discontent into Trump. And then this is what I'm going to say is like all the media talking about like black voters going to Trump and Latino voters going to Trump, or white uneducated women going to Trump, but all that kind of stuff. In my opinion, that has very little to do with why Trump got elected. Correct. Trump ultimately was selected by our ruling class. Correct. They had no. I don't know. Like, first of all, our voting apparatus is completely compromised. I don't really trust any part of it. The counting of the ballots that are sent around, the Dominion machines, all that stuff to me has been fraudulent for quite some time. And I haven't known how fraudulent it was, but I've seen people talk about votes well before 2016 or 2020 that were very suspicious. And we know the one about the one with the hanging chads.
Oh yeah, that would almost
2000 Bush 2000, right? Like all that kind of stuff. So I don't believe these numbers. Like I believe them as much as I believe polls. What's clear to me now is they wanted this guy, and that they wanted him in power. They wanted him as their face. And so again, I would say Trump was not elected, he was selected. And I think that's an important piece to understand, because he's providing them with the first thing that I think he provides them, and this whole election provides them, is the notion that their elections are legitimate.
Yeah.
Like one of the first things Biden came out and said, and I'll probably put this post in the beginning, was now we know, like, there's going to be a peaceful exchange of power. We had a fair election. We didn't win, but the other guy won because we honor democracy. And that had been deeply questioned by the American people. Like a number of people were questioning the electoral system. And now those people are like, oh yeah, here, in this case, it worked. They're saying that, right?
Yeah.
And that's important, not just to fool people into getting back into the electoral system, but as we can see if we talk about some of his appointments, the whole basis for the U.S. taking on China and Russia and projecting war into the Middle East is on the basis of the authority of U.S. democracy, the idea that we are this democracy on the hill. We know how we act. This is where liberalism and the idea that people run by the rule of law, and we transfer that over to you with our bombs and our F-16s and things like that. But
and our policies,
right? So the fact that the U.S. was going to resuscitate its election is not just an important internal thing to get people recollected under Trump, but it's important for the war making that Trump's about to do.
Correct.
And there's other things I can say, but those are the reason Trump got elected, in my opinion, has very little to do with the population. It has everything to do with what's going on in the ruling class. And one little piece I think is very interesting. Kamala outraised Trump like 1 billion to like 300 million.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting twist. Historically, people said, oh, the money just gets you your candidate.
Correct.
But in this case, the money was over with Kamala, seemingly, but the establishment was with Trump.
So I want to say a couple of things going back. So Kamala did say, and at first I thought, oh, this is a snub, like what a low jab to Donald Trump. But in reality, I think it was to what you were saying now that you're saying it out loud is the system does work, where she said, we know when we lost, or something like that was in her speech, when this is what it looks like to respect the outcome of the election. And at first I thought it was a jab to him going back to 2020, saying it was rigged, not willing to secede, and now her being like, no, I'm going to do it classy. At first I thought that's what it was, but no, I think it is on board with what you're saying, which is just gathering the herd. Kamala's identity politics at its best. And I think that this is where the establishment did it so well. They knew that people wanted change, and they said, we're going to give you the facade of change, but we're going to really sell you the facade of change. I'm going to give you everything, but you're not going to get it. But you're going to have no way of contesting it or saying anything about it, because I marked all the boxes you wanted. I marked them all. So I do think that that's why you see that a lot of money was there, because she could. I mean, a lot of wealthy people, especially like here in the Bay Area, put in a lot of money to want to see her get elected. There's a lot of wealth in the liberal side, especially when it came to identity politics. I don't know why people are I don't know why people feel they cannot say she's not fit for the role. They're afraid to say that, as if though because they're going to be labeled a bigot. They're going to be labeled
Racist
a
or
racist.
sexist.
Yeah. But she wasn't fit for the role. She wasn't even fit for the vice president role. So that's why I understand the money. Like, I see why that is the case. I think it was intended to be that way for the sake of selling it.
Right.
You have to say it. You have
Right.
to do it.
And a lot of people will say that, oh, this election shows that the people they couldn't get around the fact that the people had spoken. And that's not true. This is what happened, is what they wanted. And
they get around what people have wanted every single year.
All the time,
Yeah.
right.
They
Right.
do this
Yeah.
all the time.
Right.
Don't be fooled.
So there's nothing about this where you got over on the ruling class, or you even got over on the mainstream media. And this is another point that is made, is like, look at how weak the mainstream media now is exposed as being. Like, clearly the independent media was able to run this show because their guy but the mainstream media he's bad on democracy. That is true. He's a fascist. He's bad on democracy. And he's criminal. He's got all these legal entanglements.
His previous constituents also came out and said, don't elect them. If you elect them, like, his own people came out and said it. But yeah,
correct.
Sorry,
Vance and people like that. And,
Yeah.
and Pompeo later went back behind him. And everyone would say, well, look, the mainstream media has been exposed as feckless and is no longer having an ability to control people. And I would say the opposite is true. the reason people voted for Trump in response to the mainstream media, and they played their role. They played the role of herding you back towards him. The independent media, as independent as you could say it was, when it's still calling for people to be voted for, and I believe you can see how non-independent that media is when they're basically playing cover for all of Trump's recent appointments. But the mainstream media, I believe, really did dominate this election cycle. It basically drove the narrative that Trump was a rogue. He was the outsider. He was the person the establishment didn't want. It got everyone who was all that populist energy, both on the right and in some parts on the left, the Jimmy Dores, the Kim Iversons, the Glenn Greenwalds, like who became a person who became a Trump supporter. I don't know if they voted for Trump, but if you listen to them talk on their podcasts and channels, you're going to hear a person who's basically for Trump and against Kamala, against the Democratic Party. And so these people were all herded into that position from the narrative that the mainstream media fed them. And so the mainstream media actually is not weakened at all by this. In fact, they have very much now have a role where the people who listen to them, they would get to listen to them. The people who they want to herd over here, but where the boundaries of control are there, because like the Tucker Carlsons and the Joe Rogans are going to stay in their lane. They're not going to become revolutionaries. Essentially, I feel like everything's locked up for the U.S. ruling class after this election. Everyone's in their bin. The people are either in the mainstream media bin, or you're in your independent media bin. You're on your I'm gonna fight for the resistance against Trump, or I'm gonna justify everything Trump does now, which I think we can talk about as well. And they've been able, so that they've got everyone herded now. Like this was a perfect way to take energy that was like people in the freedom movement used to be talking about the United States as a tyranny, as a developing autocracy. And that language has stopped. It's over, because they just believe that they won their election. And they just believe that a free and fair election happened in this country. So democracy has been refurbished. The idea of the rule of law and elections that are fair and represent the people has been refurbished. And at the same time, the ruling class got exactly the guy they wanted, who, well, in other ways I'll talk about, who's going to really be able to discipline any opposition there was, at least in terms of foreign policy, to wars in Ukraine, war in Middle East, and war on Asia. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
So you think that he's gonna? Well, I mean, honestly, I don't know where his foreign policy. I don't follow what he's doing or what he's planning on doing. But I do remember hearing a lot of arguments saying that if Trump would have been president rather than Biden, we wouldn't have had the Russia Ukraine. We probably would have had the Israel Hamas. We probably would have had that. But just because they keep saying that Trump would have had Putin in line and even China under control. So I don't know that that's necessarily the case. He is coming to wars that are already done, and Russia does not seem to be slowing down. I don't see Trump being able to appease that, but I don't know.
We'll never know if the way that things went down in Ukraine would have happened the same way. All I can say is that between 2016 and 2020, Trump did a lot. He was the major person to arm the Ukrainian military, and the INF treaty that he got out of, which basically allowed them to put intermediate nuclear missiles, was the thing that was threatening and worrying Russia in relationship to the border, the boundaries of, like, when NATO said we're going to take Ukraine, those are the sorts of things they're worried about, those kinds of missiles being put on their border. So I'm not convinced that's the case. That Trump escalated the threat that Ukraine represented to Russia during his first term. So they can say what they want, but I don't necessarily buy that. Trump has said that he's opposed to the war in Ukraine, or like that he thinks we need to get out of the war in Ukraine.
That's what my understanding was, that he was going to cut.
Yeah, that he was going to cut a deal with Putin and reach that. But his Mike Waltz, his Secretary of State of Marco Rubio, is definitely a person who's been supporting and been an advocate for for the U.S. playing a much more aggressive role than they are playing in Ukraine. Marco Rubio has been critical of Biden not going far enough to arm the Ukrainians in their fight against Russia. Mike Waltz, which appointment is that? Mike Waltz is
as national security advisor.
Yes. Okay. So Mike Waltz, who a lot of people made a big deal out of the fact that when Mike Waltz was appointed, many people made a big deal of the fact that Trump did not appoint Mike Pompeo, the previous guy who was a complete neocon. Mike Waltz has identical politics to Mike Pompeo. Like basically, he's hard on China, hard on the U.S. wanting to go after Iran, and historically has also been a guy who has said we have to do more to support Ukraine. He's also a guy who said we should never have gotten out of Afghanistan. And so, again, what you have is a situation where the anti-war sentiment that was in this country, to the extent that it existed, largely existed more in the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. There's within the Democratic Party those people who oppose what's going on in Israel, and they lost some votes by virtue of that. So I'll say more about that. But the opposition to the war in Ukraine was largely more on the conservative side and things like that. And now I believe they have it captured. I believe they've got Trump to sell them that war. I don't believe Trump is getting out of that war. I think he's set up all the people in the position who support that war. And when he's not able to reach a deal with Putin, he's going to say, I tried to do it. Putin is just being unreasonable. I'm not I have some other ideas. Yeah. And I also believe that there's going to be something that's going to happen that's going to force the U.S. hand to escalate and to not pull out of that war, but push more into it, as well as push up military spending, which is something that was going to happen no matter who the president was.
They're the only budget that never gets cut.
Right. But I think, again, when you think about what has been accomplished by this election, you had one party, one set of people who were supposedly kind of looking for an anti-war president. And now that president is appointing war hawk after war hawk after war hawk. And people are basically saying, well, I don't like it, but it's Trump and maybe he's got a plan. Maybe he's going to do something. And then on the other side, people who said they were against, at the very least, in the Democratic Party side, you have those folks saying we're against what the U.S. has been doing in Gaza and Israel and the Middle East. And those folks voted for a candidate who was supported by Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney. So you have really, I think people have to understand how much political sentiment has been corralled into accepting war making, into accepting our democratic system as democratic when it is not. Folks have been criticizing this thing as autocratic and tyrannical, and they are right. And now that criticism has gone away. And that it has gone away as a result of this election and as a result of Trump's victory. And that is what has been accomplished here is a giant cosmetic job on a system that people were starting to think was really messed up. And you now have a person in place who's much better equipped to push war, sell war, and he's got the people in place to do it. And the people who said they were going to oppose him, Tucker Carlson has been, screaming at the Republican Party about the Ukraine war. Watch to see what Tucker Carlson does when Trump doesn't get out of this war. Just watch. I don't think he's going to scream.
And with them taking the House and the Senate?
Well, the base of the majority of the Republican Party and the vast majority of the Democratic Party wants to stay in that war because they believe that they are in an existential. They need U.S.'s position in the globe is existential in relationship to Russia and China, and I believe retreating from Ukraine is it's not the same as Afghanistan. It would represent a gigantic victory for Russia because you were directly facing them there and you retreated. So I don't think they can do it. I don't see how they can do it and go on and think that they're going to turn this thing around and go after China with proxies in the Philippines or Taiwan or something like that, because they've already abandoned one proxy in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I don't see how you pick up the pieces of this conflict. So that's what I guess I'll say.
So you see it as it's a non-negotiable win. You have to win.
Yeah, that's
so it means you're gonna end up putting more and more money.
Right, and that's why I believe that the people who Trump's putting there are setting us up for that. And they're going to be the people who say, we didn't want to have to do this. We were looking to get out. They're not going to be able to get out. I don't think Putin's going to provide any sort of look. What the U.S. needs to do to get out is to basically say, Russia, you defeated us. We surrender. We give you everything. And they're not going to do that.
No.
And Russia will not accept anything less than surrender because they've lost 80,000 to 100,000 soldiers. All right. Smaller than Ukraine, but it's a large number to pursue a war against NATO and the United States. And they're not going to be at this point of victory, which they are at. They're not going to withdraw from that. They're going to insist that the other side surrender on their terms. And it'd be crazy not to. Putin will, if Putin doesn't do that, then he is going to actually face an internal challenge. So, like, I don't see Russia giving the United States any latitude to do anything other than saying, you won, we lose, we'll get out of here. And I can't see the United States doing that.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. The only thing that I'm kind of hesitant on is, I'm strongly for the fact that yes, the apparatus, everything went the way that it was intended to. I don't know because we're screwed. We're already screwed. So I'm just thinking 4 years when we go to vote again, are we going to be facing a situation where it's kind of like, well, we're neck deep in all of these wars. We have to continue with someone similar to Trump, which won't be Trump, but someone similar to Trump, or will that get people to say, no, fuck it, set it aflame, and we're going to go with someone else? Either way, it's either you continue with the establishment and continue with what we have already have, or you really do get the revolution in the United States, which is not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, it is what I think needs to happen, but certainly not in that 4-year time. But 4 years is a lot of time. I mean, you can think about how much happened under Trump's regime, how much happened under Biden's regime. There's going to be a lot of events between now and 2028. The question is the U.S. by virtue of this election, is the U.S. ruling class in a better position to capture people when they do their mischief, both domestic, both in war abroad or domestically, or they are in a weaker position to control people? And to me, they are in a much better position to control people at home as a result of this election. And that's why I would urge people, if they do think about why this election happened or why Trump got voted or got elected, don't get fooled by people talking to you about Black voters and Latino voters and things like that. Look at what has happened at the top. Look at how much they have gained from what has happened here. And I think then you'll see he got elected because the people in power said he's the best guy to get us through these next 4 years. And they pretty much guarantee that, like you said, once they put Kamala in.
Yeah.
Like,
it was a done deal. There was no way. There's no way.
But they did enough to fool me, to basically be like, oh, what? Because, there was all those polls and Kamala had her honeymoon in the beginning. So it fooled me to be like, are they really going to go that way? So I can only say this with a surety now. I wasn't able to say this with a surety in September. But when I say a surety, I'm just saying this is what I believe. I can't prove it. I'm just saying that I believe, like you had said, Kamala was a head fake to push everyone that way, and at the same time make it seem like it's that's not what's happening. And all our response to Kamala was generated by the mainstream media. And so if you think the mainstream media is out of a job now, you're wrong, because they dominated the news cycle this whole time.
They fulfilled their job, because it's not their job. Their job is to brainwash and to tell us what we need to hear. Not the truth, but what we need to hear, what they want to see.
And if we respond and back away from it in some sort of way, but we're still responding in relationship to it, they've got us.
Yeah.
They've got us either whether we say, oh yeah, I'm listening to that, or these people are liars, I'm not going to listen to them, but you find yourself shaping your ideas around everything they say. That's what happened. That happened for me. I mean, if I'm sitting there looking at those polls, like way back in May is when I was like, Trump's definitely going to win this. And yet they were able to get me to kind of like, well, maybe not. I don't know what's going on here. And that's because the mainstream media was fixing my head day in, day out. So they're not out of a job here, folks. They did their job, and they're they're sitting pretty in relationship to being a tool of the ruling class to shape popular opinion, both shape it directly or shape it in response to it. And that's what they're doing.
Just what you're saying is bringing to mind just the smaller causes too, because there's also been such a turn to the conservative side when it comes to women's rights, abortion, even school, what's being taught. I know Trump is pushing for let the states figure out what they want, get the federal government out of education, which I'm not opposed to that. I say just get all of government out of education. But I just, it's looking more and more dark.
Yeah, and I believe I was talking to John Kleisick. He believes that Trump. He first of all he's skeptical of Trump's getting rid of the Board of Education, getting rid of the Department of Education. But he said even if they do it, he can see how they can actually use that to control education more centrally, like centralized control of it in another way. Like this is something that Jake knows about, but I'm not surprised because it's the same. It's the same thing as people being excited about. And I want to have another episode where we talk just about MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, and what RFK Jr.'s.
Well, because he was nominated, right?
Yeah, he was nominated to the the Health and Human Services Department. Yeah. Ultimately, that again, what in what level it's hiding all these horrible appointments he's making in terms of the national security state. Another person we didn't mention was the guy's John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe is heading up the CIA, and the things I'm hearing about are the CIA breathes a sigh of relief that he picked John Ratcliffe. And John Ratcliffe is a former CIA guy. Yeah. So I think
no changes there.
Yeah, I think what RFK Jr. is doing right now is, in partly, it's red meat for the people who wanted some hope about Trump holding on and doing things. But even in his appointment, or even in them appointing him, I think it indicates to me is the ruling class does know they've done a lot of damage to people's faith in their pharmaceutical industry and into their medical industry. And I think a guy like RFK Jr. is the perfect guy to say, I'm cleaning this thing up. I'm getting it done. We're gonna get things right again. He's not gonna make, even if he gets appointed, he's not gonna make any major changes, but it's going to do a lot to bring people back into the fold that this system is getting under control. And it won't be. And in fact, again, we'll talk about it later, a lot of RFK Jr.'s plans around the health industry are connected to blockchain and data collection, and really digitizing the medical industry, and is basically saying testing, but still using things like mRNA-based vaccines. So I think RFK is going to be basically used to rehabilitate the system more than challenge it. I can say that at one point I didn't think that they were going to even put him forward as HHS. There was a rumor about that, and I was like, man, Trump is hitting people hard with like no, no, no. But now I see that Trump is going to put a lot of these people who are war hawks in certain positions, and other people who, another person we haven't talked about is Susan Wiles, who is his chief of staff, who is a huge person behind pushing like the Pfizer. So she was big in terms of pushing Pfizer and other major companies like Archer, Daniels, Midland, and things like that. A major lobbyist for them. So that's his chief of staff. So I don't see him doing anything that's going to threaten the gravy train that the medical industry or the defense industry or any industry that people think they're fighting. Trump is not going to be fighting with you. He's going to be hiding the fact that these things are still going after you. And he's going to make you think you've got an ally there, when what he's really doing is hiding the fact that the enemy is still at the door. That's my sense.
Yeah, I'm still processing a couple of things. Yeah. I had a thought about the getting rid of the Department of Education, but that'll be for that conversation with Jake. I actually had some things I'd like to mention. I'm not going to mention them here, but Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, Eduardo, I did you wrong. I didn't push back on some of the things that you probably would have wanted me as far as people voting and people's voice maybe being heard. Although Eduardo would agree that this is all a scam with the federal election. So
Yeah.
as far as the local, I mean, I don't know what you would have said because it doesn't have anything to do
I
with what's going on right
don't
now.
know, don't care. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, there's stuff to be said there, but
But
I didn't even
same.
pay any attention to that.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, there is something to say, but that'll be for offline. No, I'm sorry, folks. Didn't challenge him. I actually agree with a lot of the stuff that you're saying. I personally do. I read a lot. I do read a lot of news. It's the first thing I do when I wake up, and it's the last thing I do before I go to sleep. And I don't. I use Apple News, which I do believe feeds me a lot. It does the algorithm, right? So it feeds me a lot of the same. But I didn't have that. I did not feel the impact that you felt as far as reading where the polls were because I didn't read that stuff. Like I was reading more other articles, but it's interesting though that it because I would have thought that it wouldn't have impacted you.
I would have thought too, but it did. You know,
I
like
know.
I know in May I was like, Trump's winning this easy
Landslide, yeah.
landslide. And then when Biden failed in his like
Speech,
in
his first
I was like, and then I was like, oh, this is and then particularly when Trump had his so-called assassination attempt, it's like, oh, there's nothing that can defeat this guy.
Yeah.
But then, you know, they started doing their Kamala thing, and I was like,
Maybe.
well, maybe they've got a different thing in mind. Like,
Yeah.
but so I was fooled. But that's why I believe that like people, where I want the freedom movement to go is back where it should have been, which is out of the Republican Party, out of the Democratic Party, out of party politics, and into building your own thing. Like, don't look at these people as somebody who's going to do anything other than attack you. And unfortunately, people are making a lot of excuses for Trump. And it was the same thing that was done for Obama. And it destroyed the anti-war movement. At least on the left part of it is destroyed. And now you have a left, like I said, that actually entertains the idea that we will vote for a Dick Cheney supported candidate as our president, and we're going to be upset if that person doesn't get elected. It's like, look at the damage that was done to the Democratic Party in terms of what they thought they stood for and where they are now. That's what's going to happen to all you folks on your conservative side. All your values, you're not going to change Trump. You're not going to change the system. The system is going to change you, and it already has, and it did it in literally a day. And the day was Tuesday, November 5th.
Yeah, and I guess if there's more of a fight for your values, because right, they're selling you the conservative, the home, the family values, and yet what is it, Matt Gaetz?
Matt Gaetz, yeah.
They're wanting to push his nomination without the ethics investigation being made public.
Oh, I didn't know about this.
Yeah, so they're trying to get him elected. They're pushing for the Senate to not share. They're saying that it's not going to do any good, even though he was, I guess it was drug use, sexual assault, and taking gifts, inappropriate gifts.
Yeah, but I mean,
here's the thing: everybody does it. All of them do it.
Yeah, and
it's just the one that was like put on as a trial, but everyone does it, and it's just to say that they don't care about your values.
Right, and for me, there's literally no way that Washington can use the term ethics and saying we're doing something with the relationship. You can't. I mean, these are people, secret societies and things like that. Like I think about Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Imagine, think about, or Hillary Clinton. Think about the kinds of things that they've probably done. And I don't trip about ethics things. I don't like it's not a joke. It's really awful, but I won't use their assessment of Gaetz to assess him. I'll just say Gaetz is with Trump, and that's all I need to know. And if you thought he was a guy who was going to fight for you, well, now you know he won't, because he's with Trump. And it's not because Trump's a bad guy. It's because the establishment wants Trump to fool you. And he has. And the sooner we start to wake up from that, the sooner we can just kind of say, okay, how do we build our own thing? Not count on something that's going to come from them. Because the divide between rich and poor is going to grow much greater over the next 4 years. The level of surveillance and electronic surveillance that they're going to talk about in relationship to the border, but it's actually going to be implemented here as well, is going to escalate over the next 4 years. The defense spending, and I believe the level of the violence of the wars that the U.S. is involved in are going to grow in the coming years. For sure, we know it's going to happen in the Middle East
Yeah.
and likely in China. Some people are thinking he's going to pull resources out to focus there. I personally don't think they can accomplish even that. So I think they're going to be stuck in 3 wars, but they're going to have war hawks there, and those folks are ready to fight. I mean, they are. They're there to put the U.S. into a position to defend its interests and to promote the democracy that it just went through abroad, everywhere. Democracy in Ukraine, democracy in Asia, and democracy in the Middle East by supporting Israel, which is the democratic, so-called democratic example.
Pioneer.
Example in the region. So
Yeah.
we're going to hear that. They're going to use the term democracy to fool us into believing we live in a democracy, and then to push their wars abroad and get us to justify the kind of violence we're going to do there, which is really about just controlling resources and markets. So it's not good. That's what I would say.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was, regardless of what happens in the federal, look at your local.
Yeah.
Because you're probably even more screwed. So you got to figure it out. No, you
Right,
have to figure it out. Because I know here in San Francisco, it's bad. Like it's bad. But again, going back, do your own groups, form your own support,
Yep.
see what you can do.
Yep. And it's all going to feel smaller than the level of the problems that we're dealing with. Like the things the people you're talking with it's going to be like, wait, this is just me and 2 other people or whatever. But there's much more hope of that turning into something that will change anything than looking at that guy up there.
Yeah.
Stop looking at him. Just know that he's not doing you any favors, and get back to trying to find people who believe the things you currently believe. Unless otherwise, if you continue to follow that guy, you are going to find your politics getting changed. You are going to find yourself justifying things that a year ago you would have never justified. And it's not worth it. It's giving up, and we can't do it. So let's not do that. I say that as a person who's seen this happen over and over and over again in the Democratic Party side. I guarantee you it's happening to you on the Republican side right now. It's the same process.
Would you say it was worse during Obama? Or would you say it's worse right now during Trump?
It was harder for me during Obama because I was just
You're a racist.
Yeah, and also people would get, even my own comrades would get accusations of ultra leftism and things like that. Like I was, so it was more confusing under Obama. I would say that I feel more prepared to deal with this now. Like I feel more like, okay, I've seen this before. I know how to talk to people about this. I'm just going to say the same thing over and over again. Don't do it. Like urge them not to do it, and they'll still do it. But I am hopeful that maybe there's a level of skepticism that those people have, even as they follow Trump, that they won't. That people followed Obama to the end of the earth, just like they followed Clinton. I'm kind of hopeful or hoping that people will not follow Trump to the end of the earth like they did Obama. And if Tucker
It's a different set of group, though.
Yeah. And if Tucker Carlson defends Trump on what he does, I'm hoping people are willing to look at Tucker and be like, no, dude, you're now trying to sell me something. Same with Alex Jones. You're trying to sell me something, because that's what Alex Jones is doing right now. He's basically talking about how Iran's going after Trump and and Trump might not survive in the next year. And he's just whipping up the fear about it to make Trump the guy that we have to protect. And it's like, it's nuts. And I'm a defender of Alex Jones in terms of free speech. And I actually think he was right about 9/11. I've learned some things from he's one of the first people that I've heard about chemtrails.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a Alex Jones hater, but by and large, he's operating like he's behaving like an operator, like an operative who's trying to herd people towards Trump. And I know there's people who I'm close to who believe he is exactly that kind of person. I don't know the Alex Jones story enough to speak to that.
I don't either, but it sounds like he got herded, and he has a big audience that he can herd along with him.
Yeah. The same with Candace Owens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, Candace Owens. Although I have my opinions about her. I actually do like her. I actually
do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like when she talks about like she was an anti-vax mom and things like that, it's like, yeah, she seems pretty sincere, and she seems it, but she's hurting everyone into that thing. So, I mean, she's not my enemy. It's just like she's not doing us any favors by you following that part of her prescription for you. So
Yeah.
I think that's it.
That does it.
All right.
Sorry, Eduardo.
No, happy birthday, Emma.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday, Emma.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you.
And thank you very much for sticking with us for this episode.
Yeah.
And let me do the outro. Yeah.
All right, that does it for this week's episode. Okay, go for it.
That's it. No, we have more to say than that. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We don't post information about our topics. We don't post anything because YouTube won't let us. But if you're on Odyssey, BitChute, and Rumble, you get to see those things. So thank you. But you can see all our stuff on whatsleftpodcast.com. But if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, and turn on your notifications to any of those 7 platforms. We're still on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on iTunes. We're on BitChute, Odyssey, Telegram, and Rumble. And if you'd like to give us feedback about something you've heard here or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. Although for the next 4 weeks, you're just going to be hearing about Trump.
Sorry,
And
folks.
that's what it's going to be. So you can make suggestions, but I'm just going to be talking about this for a while.
He'll add it to the queue for the following month.
That's right. All right. So thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.